welcome everybody to the final installment of our 5-part Community Heart and Soul workshop series. Today we're going to focus on community investment in heart and soul. My name is Eric Ortiz, and I am Senior Associate with the Community Heart and Soul. And I've got a special guest here with me, Jason.
Hi everybody, I'm Jason Nicest. I'm the Community Development Coordinator at the Community Foundation of Greater Dubuque.
Welcome. Happy to have Jason here. Welcome to all of you. So we've had some good things coming in through the chat. Today we are using, as we have for all the past workshops, we're using Adobe Connect as the platform, and that allows us to be able to share some visuals with you all, and you can see myself and Jason, and we'll be asking questions and trying to keep things interactive. So please, again, just join in listen-only mode if you could. And if you're having any issues, you can email to info@communityheartandsoul.org, which is just on your top right of your screen. I also want to just call attention to a couple of resources we have. On the right-hand side, you'll see a box that says Files. You can download our community workbook for getting started. It looks like this. So if you haven't already downloaded it, please feel free to download that, and you can follow along. We'll be referencing that all day today. And then down towards the bottom, we have some website links for you. We've got the Community Heart and Soul website and Facebook page, and we've also got the community, the workbook in online format, and then we've also got a link to Jason's organization, the Community Foundation of Greater Dubuque. So welcome. I see folks still coming in, so welcome. You haven't missed much. We've got the chat box here, and we will be inviting folks to interact throughout the workshop. Please feel free to keep the chat going. And yes, I see a couple folks are having some issues. If you having audio issues, please email info@communityheartandsoul.org. So throughout the course of this virtual workshop series, you've had the opportunity to hear from various heart and soul coaches. Jason is also a heart and soul coach. You've also gotten a glimpse into how organizations like the Pennsylvania Humanities Council and Transform South Jersey and Georgia EMC partner with us here at Community Heart and Soul and invest resources not only in their employees to serve as coaches, but also directly into towns to strengthen their heart and soul efforts. In this way, it really helps develop deeper relationships within the organizational footprint for some of our partners. So as I mentioned today, I'm honored and privileged to introduce you to Jason Nicest from the Community Foundation Greater Dubuque. He's going to share the particular ways that his foundation has chosen to invest in heart and soul in various communities across Iowa. And throughout today's session, he'll also be drawing on his experiences as a coach to discuss the different ways that Iowa towns have approached their heart and soul efforts. So welcome, Jason.
All right, thanks, Eric. So good morning. Well, I guess it's afternoon even here in the Midwest. Good afternoon, everyone. So again, I'm Jason Nicest with the Community Foundation of Greater Dubuque. We are a philanthropic organization that works in the 7-county region. You can see the graphic there that shows the counties that we work in right along the Mississippi River, kind of where Wisconsin and Illinois come together. Dubuque is in Iowa, right across the Mississippi. Most of our region is very rural, very small towns, beautiful kind of hilly bluffs along the river. Lots of fertile farmland, lots of wonderful small towns. It's the oldest settled part of Iowa, so lots of really great communities that I get to work in every day. The Community Foundation of Greater Dubuque, our mission is to strengthen communities and inspire giving. So Community Heart and Soul has been an important way for us to help the philanthropic boards throughout our region and nonprofits really understand what communities need, what are communities proud about, what do they want to strengthen. And we've been able to successfully use a lot of the heart and soul tools with nonprofits, with our affiliate boards, to help them understand their communities better and make sure that the philanthropic dollars that they have to invest are making the biggest impact possible. So broadly, that's how we have really thought about Heart and Soul as a way for us to do all kinds of different work. I've worked in 5 different communities, some with individual towns and some at the county level with multiple towns within the county. So we've effectively used it to make those connections and help communities discover what matters most and really build a plan for their future based upon those deeply held ideas about what makes their town special. So some of the towns we have worked in, again, have been at the county level. So we've helped establish, and that was their goal, was to establish that more at the county-wide level. Worked with and as Eric had mentioned, different kinds of coordinators, different kinds of processes, and some of them within our 7-county region and some throughout Iowa, even in Illinois, really trying to establish a community of practice, if you will, within the Midwest of communities that have done Heart and Soul and want to connect with other like-minded communities in the Midwest and learn from each other. So we've had lots of experience. I'm helping mentor a coach out in western Iowa. We've developed lots of allies at the state level, working with the governor and the Economic Development Authority and lots of other statewide organizations too, to help them with our extension, Iowa State Extension Service, to really help them understand how the Heart and Soul tools and process can make a difference in rural communities, which often get overlooked in traditional planning processes. So one of the towns that I'm working in right now is Cascade, Iowa, and they're working really hard right now to get their action plan distributed out into the community. They've been working over the last couple of years to gather their stories and reach all the different missing voices in their community. They've done some really innovative outreach work using music events, as you can see, doing lots of interviews, doing story gathering at local events, and actually just about 45 minutes ago, they just wrapped up some live interviews that they're doing with key people in the community who are going to be carrying some of their action ideas forward. So Cascade Heart and Soul has a great Facebook page if you want to look at that and really see some of the work that they've been doing firsthand. They've done a great job up till, and now they're really looking for those stewards, the stakeholders in their community that are going to carry their work forward. So if you want to see a really solid Heart and Soul process in action, check out my friends in Cascade at Cascade Heart and Soul on Facebook. So that's
Awesome.
Just a little snapshot of who I am and what I've been doing.
Thank you so much, Jason. That's really helpful. I think it's nice to always get, throughout this series, we've been getting little snapshots into what's happening in communities all across the country. So it's wonderful to hear everything that's happening and happened in Iowa, and things are moving and shaking. So that's fantastic. All right. So just quickly want to run through, if you've missed any of our workshop series, please make sure and check the recordings. We've got recordings available. And so I just want to run quickly about some of the things that you've heard in our previous sessions. For those of you who were unable to join, no problem. We will run through those really quickly, and then we will start talking about community investment. So you have heard throughout this series about how Community Heart and Soul is purpose-built. It's specifically for small towns and cities. The approach is not cookie-cutter. Community Heart and Soul is designed with the unique characteristics of each community and the people that live there at the core. The approach, the work is face-to-face. Community engagement is really important. There are a lot of different ways to do community engagement. We encourage that folks get together, meet one another, start talking to each other, build relationships. Now, this looks a little bit different now in the time that we're living in, but there are safe ways to gather. We like to talk about physically distanced but socially connected. So You can still do that, and there are safe ways to do that, and we have examples of that. If you reach out to us, we can tell you a little more. Community Heart and Soul is data-driven. All of our community engagement, from the story gathering and listening to comments on sticky notes, it all generates data that is then analyzed through our purpose-built system, our community network analysis. The data provides a clear picture of what residents value most about their town. And Heart and Soul is absolutely action-oriented. You even heard just a few things right now from Jason. Connections lead to relationships and trust, which then lead to sharing of experiences and ideas, and those can become the basis for actions that the entire community can get on board with and feel good about. You we introduced you to the 3 main principles and the 4 phases of Heart and Soul. Getting started work is really what prepares and launches people into their heart and soul effort. Our 3 principles focus on what matters, involve everyone, and playing the long game. Those are the key principles for Heart and Soul. And with the phases, as you can see on our wheel on the right, it starts with imagining. Build a foundation, and imagine, communities can imagine what they want to see for a new future for their community, or what they want to see to make their community better. And then connecting. The communities connect with each other via stories and really bridge divides based on what everyone loves and cares about in their community. And then planning. Planning is the next phase. The communities use the stories to develop heart and soul statements, and then the communities can build action ideas around those heart and soul statements, and they can use them for a wide variety of things. And then last but not least, as we mentioned, acting. Communities come together and guide changes to move their towns forward based on what they have done. We've also looked at, told some stories about key outcomes for Heart and Soul. So you can see on the screen, it can be anything from new leaders emerging, trust being built where there may have been historical divides, downtowns can get re-energized, and history and culture can be honored, and pride can be restored in some communities. You even got to hear the story of the church in Mount Holly Springs, Pennsylvania, that had been long abandoned and forgotten about by the greater community. But through the Heart and Soul process, the history and the culture surrounding this church were unearthed and honored by the community, and now it's a community staple. And you also, with our colleague Alexis Halbert and one of our other coaches, Eric Estrada, they talked about the importance of a community coming together to assess whether they're ready for a process like Heart and Soul. They talked about community interest, community leadership, relationships and community culture, and resources as the 4 key elements communities will want to consider before they embark on Heart and Soul. Eric talked about how these activities looked for several New Jersey communities preparing for Heart and Soul, and Alexis also guided you through the activity on community readiness, the inventory activity. So these are all things that you can do in your community as you're kind of prepping and seeing if you want to dive into this Heart and Soul. And then our colleague Leanne Tingay and another coach, Jen Danifo, they guided you through a few fun activities on identifying who lives, works, and plays in your community. They led you through an activity to identify some of the formal and informal groups that may exist in your community, and just gave you a few ideas about how different communities use the tools and activities that Heart and Soul has to map out different groups, networks, connectors, and all of that really is to reinforce Principle 1 of Heart and Soul, which is involve everyone. Then last week you got to hear from our colleague Sarah Leitner and Coach Jenny Robbins. They got to talk about the importance of developing clear, concise, and authentic messaging about Heart and Soul that can resonate with different audiences, whether you're talking to neighbors or friends, or if you're talking to business owners, or maybe you're talking to city council or other elected officials. It's important to have a strong, concise message about Heart and Soul and the goals and the and the aspirations for your community. Jenny brought this to life with sharing some of the successes in the Thomaston-Upson community in Georgia and how they were really able to spread the word throughout their heart and soul process about what was going on and getting as many folks involved as they could. So these are the milestones for getting started. And so you've heard about all of these. And be sure to access our recordings if you want to review these topics again, or if you missed any of them the first time around, you can go back. We've got everything recorded, and you'll be all set. And keep in mind that the Getting Started Community Workbook, it guides you through the steps so that you can have these conversations in your town and see if your town, your community is ready for heart and soul. So with that, today we're focusing on that last milestone of talking about the resources that are needed by communities in order to invest in heart and soul. Great. So talking about your community's investment in the heart and soul process is a really important step in bringing the model to your town. So think about this, and you can put things in the chat if you would like. What does investment mean to you? What does that term mean? You know, for us, planning in advance helps you prepare for what you'll need for heart and soul to be successful. It's important to consider the strategies that your community has used in the past to support different projects and initiatives, and you know what that looks like in your community, so you'll have an idea already of how ready your community might be for heart and soul. And when we talk about investment, what we're really talking about are time. You know, I always like to use the term time, treasure, and I forgot the third one. Time and treasure and talent. But time. So, you know, we have volunteers all across the community, and maybe they can only spare some time to bake cookies, as you can see there. Or maybe they can spend a whole afternoon at a table at an event to talk about heart and soul. As you can see, there's some folks there from San Elizario in Texas volunteering at some kind of an event or a fair. And there's also those cookies look absolutely delicious, and that's from some folks in Cascade. Other things that we talk about with investment, we're talking about in-kind resources. We're talking about donated office space or technology. You can see some young folks here cleaning up a space that was donated to be the Heart and Soul headquarters in Bucksport, Maine. We're talking also about direct financial contributions. This can be grants. You've heard a few things in the past workshops about grants that can become available. Donations. Heart and Soul teams can really use all different kinds of investment. And then there are shared opportunities in terms of, for example, pairing a Heart and Soul event with something else that's happening in the community and really kind of using Heart and Soul as a way to join into other community activities and vice versa. And again, you'll see you have what looks to be some delicious food being served from a community event that was happening in San Elizario. So when we talk about investment, there are different categories that we like to break things down into. In Heart and Soul towns, there are generally 7 categories of investment, and these can be found on page 30 of the workbook. We'll talk about the categories of coaching and project coordination in just a few minutes, but for now we want to start with categories 3 through 7 and how each category kind of fits into the work of Community Heart and Soul. So I'll run through these quickly, and then we're going to bring Jason back in to talk about these. So we have office and administration. That's like office space, phones, email, internet, whatnot. We have marketing and communication tools, so that can be everything from promotional materials to a website to professional videography, advertising. Then obviously don't forget about food and drink. Everybody enjoys a little food and drink now and then. So this can be food and drink for heart and soul team meetings, or it can also be broader and food and drink for broader community events. And then we have supplies. I think that's something that is pretty straightforward. I call it the boring category, even though it's very important. But these are things like photocopies and flip charts. Maybe you need some voice recorders for your story gathering. All the different kinds of things that maybe some folks don't necessarily think about. Those are the keys for supplies. And then last but certainly not least are subscriptions and fees. This is everything from vendors' fees at events to Zoom subscriptions, which is kind of a big thing these days. And there are different apps and platforms such as Slack or Glip where Heart and Soul teams can use those kind of as a project management tool to come together, and all of those have different associated fees. So I know I ran through those quickly, but I wanted to bring Jason in and see if, Jason, can you share with us a little bit about, I want to dive into a couple of these, and I think one of the, well, they're all important, but I think one of the really important categories is that marketing and communication tools. Can you tell us a little bit more about what you've seen?
Well, I think everything that you see in these last 5 categories, these are the things that are going to make your heart and soul process seem real. You know, it's t-shirts and buttons and the tablecloth you have at events and the vinyl banner that you carry in the 4th of July parade. Like, these are the things that the community is going to see. And I think it's important that these things don't get overlooked because it really helps people connect with it. The more they see it, the more it seems like a real thing. You know, investing in a professionally designed logo and nicely designed posters and temporary tattoos, or, you know, whatever you can do to help raise awareness about your process, it's going to make it seem like something that is worth investing that time and the talent and all those things that Eric mentioned. It has to seem real for people. So, and interestingly, you know, these last 5 categories, these are the things that it's often the easiest to fund. First of all, it doesn't take that much money to pull off a lot of the stuff that I just said as far as thinking about overall investment in your heart and soul process. And oftentimes locally available grants are the things that'll pay for tangible things. It'll pay for refreshments. They can pay for promotional materials, and the vendor fees and this sort of stuff can actually be written into a grant. In a little while, we'll talk a little bit about the things that are harder to raise money for, which is often salaries and like technical assistance and coaching and admin fees, and those things are sometimes harder to raise money for. But this kind of stuff is a little more manageable, and if you set your budget ahead of time, you'll know how much money you need. It's a more straightforward ask. One thing I would caution people about for things in this category, I know a lot of the folks on this call are very used to being frugal and making sure that you're using all of your resources efficiently. And I want to be sure that you also remember that we don't want Heart and Soul to be seen as something that's extracting resources from the community or taking things away from other very important events or organizations. So always think about, do you want to be that organization that's always asking for the free pizzas or the free t-shirts or the free printing on the banners and things? Be sure you're being smart about that, because if you are something that's supposed to be lifting up the community, you don't want to be taking things away. So really be smart about how you use in-kind investments and in-kind donations, because small businesses, especially in small towns, get asked for a lot. They get asked for the free t-shirts and the t-shirt sponsorships for the youth sports, and they get asked for the pizza parties for the high school debate team. And these are things that we want to make sure that we're not being part of the problem. And sometimes this comes up in small towns, like there's not enough to go around. So think about how you can be smart about that, would be my advice in this area. And I don't want to discount the importance of in-kind donations or actual donations, but just be smart about it.
Yeah, I think that's important to think about. Where are those pieces where maybe it's an easy in-kind thing for someone to do, and so absolutely folks can, offer a little office space or some of those types of things, but then there are those other costs where it's like,
Yeah, and a lot of it comes from, like, you're going to have a leadership team. You'll have people on that leadership team who own businesses, and they own, there may be teachers at the school. So, could that teacher at the school, are they able to let you use their Zoom account for your public events? Or, is there a guy who on your team who owns an insurance company says, I'll make the copies of the flyers for you? Like, those are things that are pretty easy in-kind donations that aren't super expensive, but it helps add up. So, oh gosh, how are we going to pay for the Zoom subscription? Well, that's the kind of thing that you might be able to use as an in-kind donation that isn't going to actually extract something from the community. So, again, not to discount the importance of those things, but be smart about it and you leverage those resources that exist on your leadership team in particular, because those are the folks who are bought in. Like, they're the ones who will willingly make those donations versus you going to someone and having to convince them that heart and soul is just as important as the garden club or whatever. Like, that's hard.
Right. Yeah, it's important to be kind of embedded in the community and a part of it, and not competing with other things. That's not really the goal for Heart and Soul. So I think that's important to think about. All right, so you get a little bit of a sense of what those areas of investment, what those entail. So now I want to talk about the role of a coach. You've heard us talk about Heart and Soul coaches. We've had Heart and Soul coaches along with us for this whole virtual workshop journey. And so what really is the role of a coach? And then we'll talk with Jason about his experiences. For us, coaching is an integral part of the Heart and Soul process. Some coaches are funded through their employers and work directly with the communities in their organization's footprint, as you heard Jason mention a little bit earlier, and others can be independent consultants. If you want to know more about different coaches across the country, please go to the coach page on our website, and you can get a little bit more information about that. And also, you'll see in these images here, we've got one of our coaches on the left side delivering a training. That's one of our coaches, Mona, in Virginia, doing the in-person thing when we could still do those things. We can still do those things, but we have to be a lot more safe about it. And then if you want to look at the right-hand side, that is one of our awesome coaches in New Jersey. Lois is delivering in something that might look a little more familiar with what you all have been experiencing the past few months. All right, so that's just a little bit about coaching. Jason, I would love to just hear more. You kind of touched on it a little bit. I would love to hear more about what it's been like in your experience with these different Iowa communities. What has the support looked like that you've given for different towns, and how might that have looked different? I would love to just hear a little bit more about that.
Well, as a coach, so far in the 5 different communities that I've worked in, I have not been a resident of any of the towns that I've coached. So part of my work has been to bring the tools and the resources that not just the Community Heart and Soul folks have, but the experiences and resources of the whole coaches network from all over the nation. I'm able to tap into that and find resources among that giant bank of resources that are localized and fit the needs of the communities that I'm working in. So, I work directly with the teams in each of the communities that I'm in to make sure that I understand where they're at in their process, what kinds of successes they've had, but also what kinds of obstacles they're facing, and then I go out and try to find things that can help them. So at each phase of their process, I deliver a training to the whole leadership team, like say, okay, we're in phase 1, so here's all the objectives and the goals and the resources that you can utilize to conduct your process here. And my primary and I do that throughout each of the 4 phases. And then my primary contact in each community is usually the coordinator, because the coordinator is the person who lives in the community. They are a resident, and they're the person who is my primary liaison. So again, I don't live in these communities, so I do try to attend events, and I go to some of their team meetings and these sorts of things, but the coordinator is the person on the ground really doing the work, and I'm their support network when they hit a roadblock, or they don't understand one of the tools, or hey, is there another town that's tried to do an event like this? let me check. And I can check with my, my network of resources and get some best practices. We really don't want any of our towns recreating the wheel on any of this. We want it to be efficient and delivered effectively using tools that have been tested other places. So that's kind of my role as a coach. I'm also given, like the region that I work in as well as the broader Midwest, I'm a resource for teams that want to get started. So if a town says, hey, I've heard of Heart and Soul, or I saw you present at a conference, or we were on a committee together and you were talking about Heart and Soul, tell me about that. So I really help at that getting started phase too, like helping like who could be on your team and what does your community look like, and give me a tour of your town so I can understand it better and see what it's like and see some of the great things that are going on there, but also some of your concerns.
Great, great. So I think that was really key to kind of understand your role as a coach, and then I really appreciate that you brought up the idea of project coordinator. Project coordination is the other big category of investment that we talk about when we talk about Heart and Soul. So just briefly, let's start with the question, and please put your answers in the chat here. In your experience, what is needed to manage a project and keep it moving along and successful? You can think of a project that you or someone else has recently managed. Maybe you had someone special in your life get married, so you had to prepare for a big event like that. Maybe it was a house project. Maybe you set up a new program at work. What are those things that you need to be thinking about when you're coordinating a project? I see some folks are typing in their answers. Clear vision, develop a strategy and tactics. Oh, nimble, absolutely. Measurable goals, 100%. Organizational skills, enthusiasm.
A leader.
Commitment. Yeah.
Very
Having
important.
a timetable, specific goals. Yes, all of this. Yes, a team working well together. That's a huge piece of Heart and Soul. Listening, nice. Yes. Yes. Absolutely.
Really great.
Well, just as with some of the things that you all are identifying in the chat here, project coordination really is about keeping track of who is going to do what and when. I think I saw someone mention that in there about having a plan. And so who's going to be involved at different stages? Who's going to take on different tasks? How will events and meetings be scheduled? There's all these things to think about. Who will coordinate communication about the project, both within the Heart and Soul team, but also out to the greater community? So this is what a Heart and Soul team needs to decide together. It's not one person coming up making this decision. It's really it's a team effort and a community effort. Heart and Soul communities usually select one or more people to serve as the project coordinator. You can see Jennifer Rogers is just to the left of the balloons in that image. She was the project coordinator in Thomaston Upson. The project coordinator, as Jason mentioned, should be a resident of the community, or at a minimum somebody who really is very familiar with the community and knows it well. It does not mean that this person is responsible for everything, far from it. They're not the sole spokesperson for Heart and Soul, and nor are they going to be doing everything themselves. That is literally not possible. So they're there to work with the Heart and Soul team and keep it organized and keep it on track. The project coordinator will work with the Heart and Soul team to plan events and meetings, coordinate communication, manage schedules, and a lot of different other tasks throughout the process. All right, so there are different options for how project coordination can look. And it can often be, as we mentioned, the biggest category for a community. And towns have really been creative in adopting a variety of different arrangements for how to coordinate for Heart and Soul based on their individual capacity and resources. So this is page 31 of your community workbook if you're following along. But here are some ideas and some ways. So maybe the local or regional nonprofit provides the coordinator. That can really be helpful when the heart and soul goals align with the mission of the partnering org. It can also be helpful if the partnering organization works well with the municipality and can also be seen as kind of a neutral convener. Another option is if the municipality provides the project coordinator, so maybe they have someone on staff that has the time and the capacity, and they can take on these tasks. That can be helpful when the city, town, staff are supported by elected officials. It can help when the town has trust in the staff, the municipal staff, and vice versa. And it can just help keep folks on the same page about the scope and the importance of the work for community heart and soul. And then the third option is maybe a new position is created and supported by some of the partners that are involved. This can really work best when the heart and soul team has the time and the energy and the wherewithal to put into a hiring process. It can also be a huge sign to folks in the town that the heart and soul process is open and transparent. And if you have an open hiring process, that can really be a sign to folks that, hey, this is not just another community engagement effort. This is something that we can all be a part of. And then there's also maybe what we've seen in several communities across the country with it being one or more volunteers. And this can work when you have a person or a few folks that have the skill set, they've got the time, they've got the intestinal fortitude to take on all of the work of a project coordinator. And then one that we see a lot, depending on the community, is because this decision is being made by and for the community, it could actually be a combination of any of these different examples that I've just run through. It really depends on the community. It depends on the people. It depends on the organizations in town. It depends on the town itself. So it really is something that needs to be individual to the community. So speaking of project coordination, Jason, can you tell us a little bit about the relationship that you've seen and how you've seen several of those Iowa towns do their project coordination?
Well, this is definitely the category that when you're thinking about investments in heart and soul, this is the part where whenever anybody asks me, like, how much does heart and soul cost? And the answer that everybody always dreads is, it depends, right? And it's just the reality of this, because the way you've described the different ways it can is so real. I've seen it all happen, and a lot of it just does depend upon the available resources in the community. As you said, the level of trust and the mission alignment with some of the local organizations who want to take this on as part of what they do. And then concurrently with that, if they have the right trust and the right attitude and the right image in the community to take on something like this that's supposed to be very inclusive and not just a role for the board or for the chamber, or this is another one of those cockamamie economic development things that we've seen come and go. You know, if the economic development group is seen as in the community, they might not be the best champion for something like this. So it takes a lot of self-awareness to understand it's not always the low-hanging fruit that's going to be the best for a project to get coordinated. And this is the hardest part to fund. You know, before we mentioned, you know, getting funds and getting admin costs and that kind of stuff funded through grants can be a real challenge. So it definitely depends upon how the resources that are available, which one gets chosen. And I would say, and I've worked with some unbelievably strong volunteer coordinators, like really great. And they're so dedicated and so enthusiastic about it. But there is a relationship between, you know, how much time they have to devote to it and the timeline of your project. Just things tend to take a little bit longer, and, you know, things don't get done quite as quickly, and they aren't quite as prioritized when you've got a volunteer doing it. Whereas if you've got someone who's, working 20 hours a week, like I know I'm going to get 20 hours of work out of that person. If the project is being run tight or full-time, would be a real asset to any community and would really help their project get done really quickly, or on schedule, like as planned. So those are the kinds of considerations you really want to keep in mind. And I've seen the whole range. I've seen like all 4 of those things that you mentioned. I've worked with all of those people on various projects. So it runs the whole gamut. But it's like all of those things that you all mentioned in the chat, like what does it take to coordinate a good project? That's your job description. Like that's the kind of person, like as you're thinking about this, who in my community has those kinds of skills? Work toward that, because even if you are paying somebody, the reason why it depends how much it's going to cost as well, to get someone who has those skills, what's it going to cost in your community? Like like literally the salary is going to be different from community to community. Like you might get $20 an hour in some communities, you might get $10 an hour in some communities. It's really hard to predict.
Yeah, so I think that's key to just, making sure that the community is doing what's best for them and realizing that. So let's just quickly, so there's a sample budget. That is pages 34 and 35 of your workbook. And I won't go into a ton of detail now, just to say that, those categories outside of project coordination and coaching usually kind of fall in the range of $15,000 for a heart and soul effort. And then, as you've heard Jason and I mention, coaching and project coordination really is individual and depends on the community.
So there's a really good question in the chat, Eric. I'd like to address. I think it's on point here.
Yeah, absolutely.
There's like some confusion about the cost to have a heart and soul organization coach work in your community. So I guess thinking back, that might not have been as clear. So the coordinator who's the resident of your community, that's someone who's going to be paid locally in your community. Now, to work with a heart and soul coach, that also is going to depend upon where you are and your proximity to someone who is a coach. There are a lot more options for distance coaching and things than there used to be. But that's kind of the relationship, and the amount of support that the community is going to need is also kind of case by case as far as when you're working with a coach. So that coach would be kind of contracted with separately. And depending on proximity, travel costs, and how much time and how much coaching the coordinator is going to need, the cost for that might vary as well. I'm able to coach communities in my 7-county region without very much extra cost, because that's part of what our organization is committing and what the Community Heart and Soul organization has committed to supporting those 7 counties in eastern Iowa. But if I have to travel outside my region to do trainings and things, the cost is different. So you have to really think about those things in 2 different kind of buckets.
Right. Yes, thank you for clarifying. I know we're kind of moving along with time and may have not been as clear with that. All right, so we've got, let's think about this funding a little bit more in depth, and we've got a couple of questions that we want to ask you all, and if you could kind of work with us, and we're going to bring these things in. Yes, there we go. So we've got one is brainstorming around funding sources and types of grants that communities can pursue to support heart and soul work. So please jump in on the left side of the screen there if you've got ideas and thoughts. And then on the right-hand side, we've got brainstorming kind of local resources for the in-kind donations and some of those things that Jason and I have talked about. So what are some of those community foundations? It's a good thing that was Jason's first answer. What else? Weaving it into existing work and funding sources, so using the leverage. Yep, absolutely. On the local resources side, we've got schools and churches for meeting space, printing companies, absolutely, local chambers of commerce, county economic development groups, absolutely. If these organizations have the capacity and can give these different types of resources, it can really help offset some costs. Community service hours for students, absolutely. Local service clubs, Rotary. Corporate support, absolutely. All different kinds of potential with government grants, whether it's USDA or CBDG, absolutely. These are all different types of kind of grants that that organizations can look for, communities can look for. Looking for folks in the community, absolutely, yes. Electric co-ops, we saw that with Jenny last week. Great, great. Local residents through neighborhood e-news and platforms, that's a great way to get the word out in terms of spreading the word and communicating with folks in the community. Oh, nice. Andrew talked about libraries having access to the Foundation Center website. So I'm sure you can search for tons of funding through some of those types of avenues. Great. Yep, local papers, residents, supermarkets. Yes, sometimes the local supermarket will give food for different meetings. Absolutely, fantastic. All right. County government, yep. Chain stores sometimes, absolutely. Great. Yes. So you guys are getting the hang of it, absolutely. There are tons of different ways to get support, whether it's traditional fundraising or whether it's finding some of those in-kind types of supports. Absolutely. Yep, banks. Oh yeah, a lot of times there are banks that really want to be involved in what's happening in the community. They can provide different types of resources. 100%. Great. Well, we've only got a few minutes left, so I think we want to open it up to broad level questions. I apologize. I know there have been some questions that have come through in the chat and get carried away and sometimes don't realize there are all these questions in there. So we've got probably a couple of questions that we have captured, and please throw some questions in. Yeah, go for it, Jason.
It looks like there's one about how things have shifted during the pandemic. And I can quickly address that with, there's no easy answers to this.
Sure.
Some of my community, we've been throwing a lot of stuff against the wall to see what sticks. And but we've had to shift and adapt. One in Cascade right now, they're at the point of really setting their priorities, like going through their data, making priorities, and normally that would be a very public process. So instead of making that a very public process with lots of events and things, with lots of speakers and voting and stickies on flip chart paper, we did do some of that electronically via surveys, which we normally wouldn't do probably. We also have shifted some of that to some Zoom meetings. We had a few community forums and said, hey, the topic for today is going to be education. That seems to be a thing that people really care about. Tune in if you wanted to see what some of the ideas were and what should be our priorities. Those were not very successful. Right, I'll throw it right out there, like we thought we tried and it didn't really work that well. So we did shift a little bit. Normally we were planning on, like, if there were a lot of priorities in Cascade around things the city ought to be doing. The city ought to be putting in new stoplights and crosswalks and all this kind of stuff. And normally we would have done that at some sort of a meeting, like where we had, different priority sheets listed and people could put their ideas up and had the city manager there to kind of talk about what the city can and can't do in relation to some of that stuff. Are these things short-term or long-term and all these kinds of things. So instead of doing that, if you go to the Cascade Heart and Soul Facebook page, we've organized a series of Facebook Live events so that the city manager can be interviewed by one of our Heart and Soul team members about, so here's some of the things that people put out there as priorities that they think the city should attend to. Tell us a little bit how the city is working on this. And that video launched yesterday, and it's already been watched a lot, like 900 times or something. So just having that opportunity for the city manager to say, hey, thanks, first of all, for doing this Heart and Soul thing, and here's how the work we're doing relates to it, in a very casual kind of 15, 20-minute interview. Another one took place today with someone at the local school district, because a lot of stuff came in. We should be doing this, be doing this. She was able to address things in a very, and in Facebook Live, it gets archived page, so it's there forever for the team to be able to repurpose and use when folks have questions about these things. So again, rather than doing that as a live event in person, right, we shifted it to online, and so far it seems to have been well received. So that's just one example quickly. Yep.
Yeah, I think there are a lot of things that folks can do to shift in terms of meeting in person and doing things virtually. Also, I just want to address this question. Trish, that's a great question about municipal investment in dollars during the pandemic. Mm-hmm. And, you know, I just think we haven't seen enough yet to really, we just haven't really seen enough yet to know. We don't know. We know that some municipalities are, you know, they're shifting all of their resources. Mm-hmm. They don't have any extra kind of funding for any other projects or programs. But we haven't seen a ton of that yet with some of our Heart and Soul towns. And then I think the other thing I would just say is a little bit of what we've seen is that, you know, then when the municipality doesn't have the time or the resources to invest, then it really does kind of push to the community, and it pushes to the other organizations in the community and the people in the community. So again, we don't have some great examples for you, Trish, but those are just a couple of things. Those are a couple of ideas.
Yeah, I don't have anything pandemic specific, but right. But interestingly, but I think, you know, what we see in small towns a lot of times is, you know, small towns, they don't have like planning departments. They don't have planning commissioners and things to do like comprehensive planning work and that kind of things a lot of times. You know, I'm working with towns of 1,500 people, 2,000 people. They don't have planning departments. So we have been able to leverage some dollars in some of the county level processes and town level processes to say, hey, we want to do a new comp plan. So if we give you $5,000 or something to help you with Heart and Soul, we can take that data that you collect from Heart and Soul and use it in our comp planning process. So the consultants we hire, or if the city manager is doing the comp plan, they don't have to do that stuff, because community engagement is always a huge part of comp planning, comprehensive plans. So there are ways that you can kind of work in tandem with existing needs, like to update our comp plan, leverage those resources, lots of volunteer time and work to do to get up to that point. But, you know, that's where we're at in Cascade right now. Certainly, we just made a presentation last night to the city council. And we've got a work session coming up in a couple of weeks where we're going to sit down with the Heart and Soul plan and say, here you go, guys. How do we get this into it's their budget session? So they're really going to be putting pencil to paper and saying, here's how many dollars we can attribute to those things. So and they're doing that because they invested dollars in Heart and Soul. They want to see the results. Right. So
yeah, I think sometimes if there is some kind of a health system or a hospital in town, a lot of times hospitals and health systems, they have a requirement to invest in the community, and that could be another way. Again, not necessarily COVID specific, pandemic specific, but that's another resource that some communities can lean on and draw from. And then Jason, I would love to hear your thoughts on, Daniel has the question about balancing the coach and the coordinator coordination in terms of like being helpful but not doing so much that it crowds out other folks being involved. What have you seen?
Well, I think a lot of that comes from what kinds of skills you're able to get around you on that leadership team, like being really strategic about having someone who's really good at communication, having someone who's really good at grant writing, having someone who's really good at organizing events, like that's their jam, is like organizing events.
Right.
Like if you get those kinds of people on your team, it's a lot easier to have the trust, because I think some of what you're describing, Daniel, I think comes from trust. You're like, well, it's just easier for me to do it myself. Usually it isn't. As far as like if you got too many of those things that you're doing yourself, and suddenly none of them are easy. So I think a lot of it is the quality of the team that you build around yourself to make sure that you have the right people in place.
Right.
And the other thing that I think between the coordinator and the coach is a lot of the stuff, I literally can't do it. Like, I don't know enough about these communities to put together their full work plan.
Right.
I don't know who the partners would be. I don't know who the contact is to make sure you reach the low-income people in the community. So I think having the coach and the coordinator really clearly understand what they're bringing to the table helps us not butt up against each other too much and overlap roles too much.
Yeah. Great. Well, folks, we don't want to run over, so please, if you have more questions, you can send them to us, info@communityheartandsoul.org, and we will definitely try to answer more of those questions. I just want to thank everybody for joining today. We invite you to be a part of the growth of Heart and Soul. So if this seems like something that your community might be interested in, we want you to definitely let us know. If you are a community member in a town and you have been joining us throughout the series and you like what you have seen and heard and want to, please share that with anyone in your community. Share it with your neighbors, your friends, your colleagues. You can also look at our website and our Facebook page for more info. And as I said, you can also email us if you have other questions. And yeah, there are other things that you can do if you know for sure your town wants to move forward. We can help you out with that. You can look at the next steps page in your workbook. And definitely, if you want to find a coach in your area, you can contact us, and we'll let you know if there's someone in your area. And for those of you who might be interested in becoming a coach, soon in the new year we'll be offering an introduction to the coach training program. You can submit your interest on the coach page on our website and fill out the interest form. And again, you can keep an eye on our website, and you'll get follow-up emails for all the recordings from this whole series. And before I get too far along, we just have a couple extra things. Number one, Jason, thank you so much for joining us and sharing your knowledge and expertise. It's amazing to me how different this can look based on the community, based on the region, based on so many different factors. So thank you. And then lastly, as we get ready to close out, you'll see a link coming into view. And click on that link to let us know what you thought about the series. If you've joined us for all of them, maybe you have only joined us for this one, that is totally fine. Please click on that link, and then you can browse to the survey. The evaluation's super short. Yeah, I think that's it. Jason, any parting wisdom for the crew?
No, just feel free to reach out if we can provide additional information. It's really, there's a lot of nuance and information that we can impart based upon your local conditions, so don't be afraid to let us know.
Fantastic. All right, everyone, thank you so much. I'm sorry that we went a few minutes over, but we really appreciate you being here, taking the time with us. We hope to talk to you all very soon. Thank you.